Some rumors spread by pro-Iranian parties in Lebanon mentioning that you would be okay with dealing with Salman Frangieh as a potential president. Is that true? And if yes, does that mean that the United States has a preferred candidate?
Absolutely not. We do not have a candidate. We do not have a vote in this particular process. The mandate for selecting the next president was provided by the people of Lebanon to their elected representatives in the parliament. Now, unfortunately, until now, 5 months after President Aoun stepped down, you still don't have a president. And not having a president means you don't have a fully empowered prime minister and a fully empowered cabinet. The whole process is locked, but it is not for the U.S. to unlock it. Rather, it is for Lebanon's own elected representatives to do so, and to do so with urgency. We have a picture of the kind of candidate that we think Lebanon needs. Somebody above ethical reproach, somebody who puts Lebanon first and puts Lebanon's needs and national security first, somebody who will work with energy and agency on the critical set of economic issues, the critical reforms that Lebanon must make in order to exit from this terrible crisis.
We also heard that there is probably a disagreement between the USA and France regarding Lebanon. How true is that?
No, we talk regularly with our French colleagues, with many other countries, because we all share a common preoccupation with the crisis that Lebanon is going through. And we talk frankly with our French friends. Again, it's not for France, it's not for the US to do the job here. It's rather for the parliament to do its job. And thus far, they have not. The first thing I heard about when I arrived last night was the readout, the press conference, the readout that the IMF team had given the government and had given a number of embassies around town, and what they said publicly. And it was frankly not just sobering, it was kind of frightening. The prognosis for Lebanon, a country which is already going through the severest of economic crises, the prognosis is, as the head of the team said, dangerous. I can't tell you how critical it is now to unlock the path to a presidential election and therefore an empowered government that will undertake these reforms. There is no time left. So that was my message to all of Lebanon's leaders.
But they haven't been feeling the urge to elect a president. Do you think that now, after they talk to you, they will be convinced?
Well, I certainly hope my message made an impact, but I think the IMF's very stark message should have made an impact. I frankly don't understand the lack of urgency that apparently many political leaders and members of parliament that they don't feel. They don't feel a sense of urgency about this, and it is strange.
Perhaps they would be frightened whenever you mention sanctions. For instance, like recently, we heard that there would be possible sanctions against Lebanese elites regarding the election. Can we dig into that? Like when, how, and against whom these sanctions will be imposed?
Well, you know, Joelle, as a practical matter, my government doesn't preview steps that it might take as it deliberates among the tools that we use to urge people and get governments to do what they ought to be doing. But I can think of no greater sanction than the collapse of the state and the responsibility that these members of parliament and these political leaders will have to bear for such a thing. And a collapse of the state is not a theoretical possibility, it's a real possibility. All the indicators are just going downhill, and in a very stark fashion. The collapse of the currency, the lack of foreign reserves, the outward migration of the youth of this country, this will have a long-term effect. So all of the indicators are going sharply downward and at an accelerating speed. So this will have an impact. It already has had an impact on the Lebanese armed forces, on the internal security forces. My government and other partner governments are doing what we can to offer short-term assistance that will help buttress state institutions. But we cannot do the job of the government itself, nor of the People's Parliament.
But is it already too late, or do you think that it is still possible to improve Lebanon's economic situation regardless of the election?
Absolutely, it's not too late. It is absolutely not too late. And the IMF has made clear that if the government, joined by the parliament, will move the country through a series of economic reforms, the IMF will be prepared to support it with a critical set of loans. But none of this can happen if the parliament doesn't do its job.
But Mrs. Leaf, let's be realistic. Today, you met the same Lebanese leaders who led this country to its demise. Do you think that people who led the country to its collapse can find the solution to the crisis that they have caused?
Look, sometimes it takes a terrible crisis to focus people's minds, to focus people on the fact that there are no alternatives left. I simply can't understand why the members of the parliament have not sat down and worked out a set of compromises on a candidate, why they have not formed a set of blocks that will empower one candidate to move forward. They haven't had any elections even since January, so something's missing here. As to your other question about Syria, so look, let me just reaffirm something. My government is not going to normalize relations with Bashar al-Assad. He has a long and very bloody history, and he has half destroyed, or more than half destroyed, his country in the most brutal fashion. As to the sovereign decisions by other countries in this region, those are sovereign decisions. They are looking to their national interests. I respect that. I would just hope to see, and we've certainly advised our friends and partners in the region, that they should get something in return for this engagement with Assad. And they should get something in two directions. One, I think it's good to press him on these issues as relates to the security of his own people, that he create the conditions to permit IDPs and refugees to return home in safety and security. And by doing so, he will also be lightening the load on some of his neighbors who are struggling to remain good hosts to refugees.